lithium battery fire. But go ahead. What's your question?
It's back to the real world.
Yeah.
What did you think about the judge's ruling would have been last Friday, a week ago tomorrow, regarding the legislature?
Oh, yeah. So, well, first of all, for people we should probably some context here is that there's been a fight at the legislature about whether a majority of the chamber has been meeting and organizing. There's 67 Republicans, 66 Democrats. The 66 Democrats boycotted it and didn't show up. And the 67 Republicans said, hey, there's only 133 members of the legislature because one seat is vacant, so that's a majority. A quorum, a fancy way to say it. And the Democrats said, no, it's not a quorum. You need to have 68. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you need 68. Adults can disagree on which definition to use. It's actually, from a purely legal standpoint, you can really argue either one. The relevant part is that Republicans and Democrats, regardless of how this plays out, need to work together to get stuff done. And if they can't agree if the Democrats can't agree to show up, then it's going to be really hard for them and Republicans to reach a deal on this stuff. And so now we've entered, I think this is the 17th day, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Of things.
But the judge identified that it's not a quorum.
Correct.
So what could get done?
Nothing. So what's happening is every single day, the Secretary of State is convening the House chamber. All the Republicans are showing up. They're punching their buttons, and the Secretary of State looks at the roll call and says, a quorum is not present, a majority is not present, and he just hits the gavel and walks away, and that's it.
Simon.
That's Steve Simon. He's the Secretary of State, yep. And so right now, the big issue is that if there was an election for Speaker of the House, the Republican Lisa Dameth would win. She has 67 votes. The Democrat candidate for Speaker, Melissa Hartman, has 66. That's if the election were to take place today, or if it would have took place at any time in the last 2.5 weeks, the Republicans would have won. And the Democrats don't like that. They don't want to agree to that. So initially, they thought they would just have to hold out for 3 weeks. There was supposed to be a special election 2 days ago. That member would be seated next week. Things would be 67-67, and they could show up. Well, that same Supreme Court that ruled that 68 is the majority, not 67, they also ruled that the governor illegally called a special election. So that special election's now been pushed back all the way to March.
Okay, let me ask you about that. So that case came about due to actions by Republicans, correct?
Well, it came about because the candidate didn't live in the district, and the Republicans.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the election, the governor calling the election too early, et cetera, et cetera. How does the Republican Party benefit from the election being pushed back?
Well, first of all, it's what the law is, right? So I mean, you can't just have the governor declaring vacancies when they don't exist and calling special elections.
Okay, so maybe I'm confused about who called or how that ended up in front of the Supreme Court. How did it end up there?
So what ended up happening is the governor, the courts have found this now, prematurely called the special election. You can't declare a vacancy unless there's a vacancy. Mm-hmm. And there was a current state representative at the time who was in office. There was no statutory authorization for this. So I think my opinion is the DFL was hoping to minimize the amount of time they were at 66 members. And so Republicans, when he did that, said, you can't do that. It's against the law. You got to follow the law. Now, they have the benefit, if you call it that, of having this special election be 6 or 7 weeks later. Now, it's a heavily Democrat seat, so the Democrats should win it when it happens, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah,
but what it does is that this temporary alignment where the Republicans have a one-seat majority, it does extend that period of time. And so I guess you could argue that gives the Republicans an advantage. But all of this is moot. You need Republicans and Democrats together to do anything.
Yeah, it's not serving us at all, us being the people.
No, not at all. And so, right now, to the average member of the public, they don't really, they don't really see what's going on. The one thing is they do not like that people are not showing up for work and they're still getting paid.
$204,781 have been spent in the 14 days.
Lord,
absent.
really?
Well, and so just But again, we want to be even-handed and fair here. That legislators do a lot of other things besides vote on the House floor.
Hold on, I got you there.
We don't know that.
But in fairness, so again, but to the public, right?
Right.
You can explain the nuance of, well, you're still meeting with people, you're going out in the community, you're working with staff. If you're not showing up for the floor session and you're still getting paid, you have an optics problem.
Thank you.
Right?
Yep.
It just looks bad. So the question now is if and when the Democrats are going to show up. Are they just going to wait until the middle of March, until they have 67 members, and then they're going to show up and say, okay, now we can organize. Look, we're tied. We're
A week ago, we had, you guys helped me, but we had Marion Rarick and her husband Jason in studio, basically saying, we know Democrats are saying, I don't understand why we're doing this. That are just doing it to follow company line.
People had been telling her that, behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, so, I have the benefit of not being in office, so I can be a little bit more candid than other people. But the Democrats do have a legitimate point on something, and that is this election down in Shakopee where the candidate won by 14 votes and 20 of the ballots got thrown away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Now, whether you like it or not, in this country, when we have an election dispute, we resolve that in the courts. Okay, we don't let the politicians decide. We don't let whoever makes the most noise decide. We let the courts decide that, and the courts decided that the DFL candidate should stay there. Mm-hmm. Now, in Minnesota, you have the legislature has the constitutional right to seat who they want. So the Republicans could show up and say, we're not seating him. And I think that scares some Democrats, the threat of that doing that. So I think that's a legitimate point. But everything else, there's nothing the Democrats are blocking by staying away that they couldn't block by showing up and voting no. Right? So they're just getting the snot kicked out of them over this. And Republicans and Democrats need to reach a conclusion on it.
But are they? Sorry, Ken. Are they getting their snot?
That's my question.
Well, I mean, again, this is all short term. I'm confident that in a year, none of us will be talking about this.
We just had an election on Tuesday, and it was 10-1, the voting turnout, pro-Democrat?
Yeah.
The thing is, what we've noticed over and over again, and, I can't rip them for it. They always stick together, no matter what. I'm talking Democrats, no matter what, and that includes the voters.
Well, this is a danger, though, right? When you have political polarization superseding accountability, you have problems. We just had a case, U.S. former Senator Robert Menendez, is that his first name?
Yeah,
from New Jersey. Like, he just got sentenced to 11 years in prison. And by the way, good for the judicial system, good for this guy getting, being forced to resign. This guy was a crook who was taking money from foreign governments, gold bars, cars, and cash. So good. That's a good thing. But there's less and less accountability the more polarization you have. Mm-hmm. And so right now, I think that there's a group of Republicans that say, listen, we're going to seat everyone who's elected, so you guys should show up. And there's a group of Democrats who are saying, listen, if you agree to seat everyone, we're going to show up. But neither of those groups of people want to undercut their leadership. The Democrats don't want to undercut Melissa Hortman. The Republicans don't want to undercut Lisa Damuth. But there's definitely a group of Republicans and Democrats who are getting kind of sick of this because this is a stalemate, right? Mm-hmm. If for anyone who plays chess, no one wins a stalemate. Only a fool thinks someone can win a stalemate. And all this does is just make them look worse, makes everyone look bad. On top of that, this makes it harder for them to get their actual work done by the constitutional deadline in terms of actually balancing the budget. There's some real problems that need to be dealt with out there, and this reduces the chance to do that.
Care to give us some wild speculation?
Ooh, yes.
I love scenarios where the shoe is on the other foot. If it was the other party, in your estimation, would the Republicans hold out and not show up for work the same way the Democrats are?
I don't think so. In Minnesota, there's so much of an ecosystem that revolves around the DFL, and this is one of the changes that's taking place is that you're seeing the new Republican Party. They're fighting back in a way that's new and different that Republicans generally don't. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is a matter of opinion. But historically, Republicans have kind of been beat up by the media. They've listened to that, and they've been the ones who have been told to kind of, hey, you gotta bow down. But on this one, they got a pretty solid case. I mean, there's 67 of them. There's 66 of the other side. Just waiting until another election takes place to show up is kind of, I think it strikes people as dirty pool.
Well, that's just it, because you had talked about, I'm putting words in your mouth, but a sea change, right? Do you think people, the voting public, I'm saying, is kind of seeing that, well, this isn't the way we should be operating? But I don't get that sense unless you guys do.
Well, I'll tell you, something that has changed is, I jokingly call it the narrative generation machine, right? Like, you've got media reinforcing media with messages of building a narrative at the federal level and at the state level, where you construct a narrative and then you write the stories, you story tell around this path you're trying to lead people on. The narrative generation machine is broken. It's not working anymore. And you can see this on issues of foreign policy, on issues of taxation, economic growth, immigration, whether it's the breakdown of shame or more polarization. The ability for traditional legacy media to generate a narrative is just broken down. It's not able to do that anymore. And where it goes from here, I don't know. I mean, I'll say, like, right now, this is just an annoyance, right?
Yeah.
And they've had goals to try to reach an agreement and blown through them and stuff. But my opinion is, if they don't reach an agreement over the week, like now over the weekend, this is going until July. This is oh my God. This is because no one, and again, I'm not advocating for that.
You're just predicting it.
But I'm just saying, like, because no one is de-escalating right now, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is just everyone's coming back in the feedback loop. So if you're a conservative Republican or you're a progressive Democrat, right, all the feedback you're going to get from your base is like, yeah, give them hell. And so the people who are trapped are the ones in the middle. And right now, this is an academic exercise, right? It's more annoying than anything that the Democrats aren't showing up. You're going to need Republicans and Democrats to change any laws this year, whether, whatever it is you want. To fund the government, you're going to need Republicans and Democrats. But if the Democrats dig in and they don't show up until they get a 67th member and they withhold the speakership from Lisa Dameth, then Republicans will feel like this was dirty pool, right? And now they're gonna respond in kind with another form of escalation. And there's a limitless number of ways that either side can escalate. But the overall point is that when you escalate, you lose control of the situation.
Sure.
And right now, these guys need to calm down, reach an agreement. Yes, I understand it's tough for the Democrats to accept that Republicans have more votes and they're going to get the speakership. But once they get the 67th vote, Republicans are not going to be able to pass anything without their support. So rather than trying to run out the clock and keep Lisa Dameth out of the speaker's chair, and Republicans, rather than threatening to overturn an election, like, they should just address those issues, and then you can show up and vote no on stuff. I think it's one thing to show up at the Capitol and vote no, and that's just partisan fighting, right? Like, they didn't vote for this or they voted for that. But when you're not showing up, that's new. Like, we haven't seen that in Minnesota, and we don't want to normalize that, but also it just looks really bad. And so I really hope that whether it's today or this weekend, that they figure this out and they reach an agreement. But at the end of the day, if they don't do that,